Hello friends. Today's chapter of the day is 1 Chronicles chapter 9. And 1 Chronicles 9 is a really important hinge point or pivot point in Scripture because it takes us out of these genealogies that we've been reading for the last 8 chapters and in to the retelling of the story of Israel. But it's also pretty confusing because chronologically it operates in kind of a weird way. And here's what we got. The first verse or two talks about the conquering of Israel by the Babylonians. And it says that Israel was conquered and carried away into exile by the Babylonians because of their unfaithfulness. So it's clear Israel wasn't just bad at running a government. They didn't just operate poorly in military situations. They weren't just conquered by a superior force. They were carried away because they weren't faithful. God is the cause of what's going on here, reminding us of that. So that happens. Then, what isn't mentioned is 70 years in captivity. So, you think about Daniel and Esther and the people of Israel being held in captivity while some other government has conquered them. That happens, and that isn't mentioned in this chapter, but we then talk about the resettling of Jerusalem afterwards. And that's really the bulk and the kind of the center of this chapter, talking about how Israel was resettled, or how Jerusalem was resettled after it came out of captivity after 70 years of captivity. So that's what's going on in the middle of this. And then at the end of this, we rewind again and talk about the genealogy of Saul, who you remember was the first king of Israel several hundred years before the captivity. So we bounce around a little bit, but what's really happening here is we're drawing to a conclusion of all these genealogies to say, here's all the people you need to know about in Israel. That takes us up through the kingdom of David, through all the kings that came afterwards, and through the captivity, and then to the resettlement of Israel. But now it's going to rewind, and it's going to talk more about sort of this golden era in Israel, sort of golden era, where Saul starts as king, then David, then Solomon, and then things start to deteriorate from there. So we're going to retell some of the stories or some of the facts that we heard in 1st and 2nd Kings, but you're going to hear different things that are focused on and different things that aren't included in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and we'll talk and think as we go along about why that is. So that's 1st Chronicles chapter 9. Super interesting, super hard to wrap your head around if you don't have a perspective. So I hope this is helpful. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody.